Hey, my name's TC Burr. Welcome to Yet, a podcast created to encourage you to get your goal or idea out of your head and into reality. On this podcast, you'll hear stories, encouragements, tips, and ideas to help you write your book, start your business, launch your podcast, or whatever it is you hope to accomplish. Because it's not that you haven't done it, it's just that you haven't done it yet. Hey, welcome back to another episode of the Yet podcast. Today's episode is episode number 30, and I am so excited to celebrate this big milestone. In fact, that's what this entire episode is going to be about, the importance of celebrating and recognizing your milestones. So if you are a writer, a creative, an entrepreneur, or any type of goal setter, it is critical to celebrate the achievements that you make, even the small ones along the way. I'm going to share with you a few reasons why it's important to celebrate your milestones, and I'm going to encourage you to think about all of the things that you're doing, all of the work that you're putting in, and remember to take time to recognize what you've accomplished and celebrate those wins. So I mentioned this is episode 30 of this podcast. About a year or so ago, I did not even have doing a podcast on my radar. I had this idea to write a book, and you've heard my story if you've been listening for any amount of time. I started telling people, and the more I talked to other people, the more kind of encouragement and excitement I would get from other writers, other entrepreneurs, other creatives who would tell me about the great projects and the great things that they were excited about getting involved in. And I remember in those moments just saying to myself, man, I've got to share this out. I've got to tell more people and get more people in on this big secret that I felt like I had discovered, which is that you can do more than just your traditional 9 to 5. You don't have to stay committed to the path that you've chosen. You can express your creativity and do some of these other things. And so that's really how the idea of the podcast was born. And when I first started, like a lot of people, I maybe underestimated how difficult it would be. I overestimated the amount of reach and virality that my podcast would get, right? I thought I was going to have millions of downloads and listens. I haven't had exactly that many, but I am thankful for all of the subscribers, all the followers, all the encouragement that I've received along the way. And to think that I made it to 30 episodes is a big deal. And here's why. I read a stat recently that 90% of podcasts never even make it to episode 3. There's a real term out there in the world called pod fade, where podcasts just go for a season and then they just drop off. And like anything that's worthwhile, doing a podcast, writing a book, starting a business, all of these things, to really, really take off, most times than not, they're going to take a lot of time. They're going to take a lot of investment. So I'm so thankful that I've been able to hang in and get you not just one season, but now going into season 2. And it's hard to believe that I've already accomplished 30 episodes. None of this would be possible without you, the listener. So if you've been with me from the beginning, or if you're a brand new listener, I just want to say thank you so much. Please continue to share this out with your friends, your relatives, folks online. I want to get these stories out to as many people as possible. So it's pretty cool to be among the 10% of podcasters who make it past those 3 episodes. And I want to celebrate all these milestones. When this episode drops, it's going to be actually either the day of or the day before my wife and I's 13th anniversary. And I paused there not because I forgot the number, but I was wondering about my grammar. My wife and I's, my wife and my's, anyway, we will have been married, Lord willing, when this episode drops, 13 years, which is a huge deal. And so there's a reason why in life, people celebrate these big moments, right? You mark these moments, for example, of marriage or birthdays or things like that, because you want to celebrate the growth and the achievement and the longevity of somebody staying committed to something for a period of time and the growth that happens along that. So here's where we're going today. If you are working on a big project, if you're a writer, an entrepreneur, a creative, somebody who's doing something big, remember to celebrate your success and mark those milestones. Track them visually and give yourself tangible rewards. This doesn't have to be anything huge, but there's tons of science behind this, and I just can tell you experientially in my own life, being able to see progress, it has such a psychological benefit. We're going to talk about some of the benefits of celebrating your success, but it's important whether you do this on a spreadsheet or if you have a whiteboard. Like you've probably seen if you've watched any of my social media, I've got a big calendar on the wall where I track a lot of my wins. Um, it's important to have some type of system, some type of visual system where ideally, if you work at the same spot every day, it's something that you will pass and you will see anytime you pass it so that you can measure your success. As you do that, reward yourself for these wins. So, one of the things that we did and we like to do in our family, when something big happens, my wife and I like to celebrate with sushi. And we have a favorite takeout place where we go and get really good sushi here where we live. And it's just kind of one of those things where it's like a little bit of a treat for that night. Like normally we're cooking dinner at home, but somebody gets a new job or something big happens, or sometimes we just, hey, we made it through the summer, we made it through another school year with the kids or whatever. We mark those moments and celebrate with sushi. So it doesn't have to be that, it can be anything, but celebrate your wins and give yourself a reward when you get to them. So when you finish a chapter of a book, or when you hit a month of hitting a word count goal, pause, write it down, celebrate that moment, share it with someone else, and give yourself a tangible reward. There's a lot of reasons to do that. Here are just a few. Number one, if you celebrate your milestones, you will get yourself in the habit of seeing yourself win. And that maybe it's a little bit of a psychological trick, but if you get used to seeing yourself make progress week after week, day after day, month after month, you see yourself achieving these goals and making progress, then that kind of becomes normative and you will expect to continue to see progress and results in the future. So I recently started reading a book called Soundtracks by John Acuff, and he talks about in the opening pages. So I'm just getting started in this book, but John talks about this idea of neuroplasticity and what his word for a repetitive thought is a soundtrack. And so where he I think he's going with this is that we can rewire and replace some of our old bad soundtracks, right? So if you're a person who says, "Oh, I'll never be able to write a book," that is a soundtrack that you've been playing in your head. And we have the ability to kind of reframe and reshape that and replace that soundtrack with a better one. So instead of saying, "I'll never be able to write a book," start saying, "I'm going to publish a book. I'm going to finish this book." And that becomes a new soundtrack that then can kind of almost like rewire, reshape, remold your brain and your mindset. So, one of the ways I think we can do that, we can establish some of these soundtracks by getting used to seeing ourselves win, by tracking our progress and celebrating our success. Similarly, number two, it creates a sense of momentum. So, it's true, you've probably seen this in your own life. Success begets success. Right now, I'm watching my favorite college football team really struggle. They've had ups and downs throughout the course of my life. But this year they've started off really bad. And there's a sense that like you watch them play and they are generally athlete for athlete better than the other team that they're playing against. But for whatever reason, these inferior teams continue to beat my team. And there is a sense, having played football, I know this, like when you continue to lose and you continue to lose, and you continue to struggle, you start to second guess yourself. You start to doubt yourself. You start to believe that maybe I'm not as good at whatever this thing is after all. And then it becomes almost like this self-fulfilling prophecy where you're used to losing, losing becomes normative, and then your team or your season or you as a performer just lose. I think winning has that same type of what's the word? That same type of infectiousness, that same type of snowball effect, where once you start to stack some wins together, now all of a sudden you start to recognize, no, I can do this. And the more you step into it, the more you realize that you actually can continue to build those momentum. So celebrate your milestones. Number one, it gets you used to seeing yourself win, and that can create a big sense of momentum. Recognizing how far you've come can help you stay motivated and keep you going. Number three, and this is, you'll see these are all connected, it can ward off imposter syndrome. So, one of the things that I have really noticed as I'm interviewing folks, writers, and other folks for this podcast, almost every person that I've talked to has mentioned imposter syndrome at some point in their journey. And they're not always the new people like me. Like there's not always the people who are just getting started. Sometimes it's people who have published multiple books, who've been doing it for a long time, will tell me, hey, I still deal with imposter syndrome. I still have days or weeks or moments where I just feel like, who am I to be doing this thing? And that's a real experience for almost all of us. But when the voice of imposter syndrome tells you you aren't good enough, now you have objective evidence that points to the contrary, which you would never have if you didn't mark and celebrate these big milestones and these big wins that you're accomplishing. And by the way, not just the big ones. Celebrate every milestone, even the little ones, because those little ones over time add up to huge success. So drown out the voice of imposter syndrome, mark your progress, and celebrate your successes. And number 4, the last benefit that we'll talk about on this episode to celebrating every milestone is it allows you to earn your rest. Here's what I mean. Do I think that each of us needs to earn rest? I do not. But I know that some of you probably do. Some of you, the way you were raised or the way your brain is wired or your heart is wired, you feel like you cannot take a break until you have accomplished a certain set of things, right? So if you're writing, maybe that's like, until I hit this word count, until I finish this draft, until I do fill in the blank, I will not allow myself to rest. I don't think you need to earn a break. I think you can and should take breaks whenever you need them. That's going to be a theme of this season on this podcast. But if you struggle with this concept, you might recognize every time you're doing something that's restful, you recognize there's an opportunity cost here, because now I'm taking the day off. Now I'm not working. Now I'm not making progress. I would argue that rest is a critical ingredient to making progress. But if you're wired that way, you could fall into the trap of working, and never allowing yourself to catch your breath. But if you track and celebrate your milestones, that gives you a little bit more evidence and a little bit more ammunition to justify to yourself that you actually can and should take the break that you so desperately need. So, again, this is a milestone episode for me. I am so excited to continue on this journey with you. I'm thankful for you for listening. For anyone who has written a review or friends who know me personally who have encouraged me, I cannot tell you how much it means. Please keep those words of encouragement coming, because again, I think encouragement is a critical ingredient to anybody's success. But I want to just, again, encourage you today. Celebrate your milestones, mark your moments, track them visually, and reward yourself with tangible rewards for these milestones that you're accomplishing. Because the truth is, if you're moving forward, you are accomplishing great things, whether it's the pace that you want it to, whether you're seeing the results that you want to or not. You are making great progress and you're doing good work, and you should celebrate that. When you do, it gets you used to seeing yourself win. Winning for you becomes normative in your mind, and it can create a sense of momentum for you. So when you start to stall out, you can look at that progress that you've been tracking and realize, no, I'm doing great. I will keep going because I've come this far and I've seen the evidence of these successes. Doing that can also ward off imposter syndrome. When that voice starts to whisper in your ear that you're not good enough or smart enough or fill in the blank enough, now you have objective evidence you can point to that speaks to the contrary. And number 4, for those of you who struggle to take breaks, it can help justify the rest that we sometimes all desperately need. So that's it for today. I hope you've been encouraged by this episode. Love your feedback. Please keep it coming. Send me a note. You can go to my website, tcburr.com. Thank you so much for listening, and I will talk to you soon. Later. Hey, thanks so much for listening to today's episode. If you would do me a huge favor, if you got value out of this podcast, which I'm assuming maybe you did since you're still here, would you scroll down to the bottom of your podcast app and rate and review the show? And maybe share it with someone on social media or with a friend, just in a conversation. It would mean so much to get this message out to more people, and I think it would be amazing if you would share it. So that would be, as a personal favor to me, I'd really love it. Also, if you want to know more about me and what I'm working on, you can visit my website. It's tcburr.com. I hope you'll check it out. You can contact me there. Thanks again, and I really appreciate it. I'll talk to you soon.